I was invited by the Cooper Hewitt Museum to curate a show based on their collection. The show is about life and death, loosely, as everything is. And it's about the rituals and the memories that we have related to all the objects, what we do with our time on this earth, and how those mundane objects intersect and inform so much of what we do and so much of what we remember and love. The name of the show is Maira Kalman Selects. And I chose from tens of thousands of objects, 40+ pieces that I thought told a story that made me delirious with joy, usually. If you were to go through the show, you would experience probably a range of emotions from delight to sorrow to humor and curiosity and discovery. So my criteria was an emotional content when I would look at the piece, but of course I'm also aware of shape and form and color and material.
Andrew and Louise Carnegie built the Carnegie Mansion between 1899 and 1902. Here at Cooper Hewitt, we like to think that if Andrew Carnegie were alive today, he'd be very proud that the house is in the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, inspiring people through design and empowering people through design.
This exhibition has been a voyage for me, and it's taken a lot of time, so clearly things have changed during that time. One thing is I broke my arm, so doing the thing that I love best, which is to walk around the city. I've written and illustrated 2 books that go along with the exhibition. One of them is for children. It's called Aha to Zigzag. The other book is for adults. It's called My Favorite Things, and it's basically a catalog sandwiched between 2 parts. One is a memoir, and one is a rumination about life and love and things. I started with memories that were very, very important to me from my childhood, and stories that I heard that I wasn't part of. One of them was that my mother, in her little town of Sluch in Belarus, fell into the river and was saved by her grandfather's very long white beard. And another memory is where my father fell off the terrace in our apartment in Tel Aviv wearing a gray suit, and nothing happened to him. He fell to the ground and he was fine. So this is basically a love story between Toscanini's pants and my mother, Sarah. In 1937, Toscanini came to Tel Aviv to conduct the Israeli Philharmonic, and we believe that he wore these pants to conduct. At the same time, my mother was also in Tel Aviv, and I imagine that if Toscanini was walking down the street and ran into my mother, he'd fall madly in love with her. And I would be Maira Toscanini. But that's not what happened, but I like to think about that. In an amazing moment of history, Toscanini's pants, these very pants went up for auction, and I won them, and I own them, and they're part of the exhibition. When I look at the pieces in the show, the relationships between ancient work and modern work is very connected. People made them, people designed them, human hands, human eyes. And the question always becomes, what do you look at to inspire you to go on to the future? What are you going to do next? Hopefully, you begin, as I begin my work, with an empty brain and just allow whatever impressions that happen to be there flow in. The show begins with this face, this embroidery of we think it's a man, peevish, disconcerted, annoyed, maybe sad. This piece is 5th to 7th century AD. It's Egyptian. It's one of my favorite pieces in the show and makes me feel as if we're kind of being honest from the beginning. And it's full of questions and emotions, and I think that's a good way to begin a show about design and life. I wanted the vitrines to be pieces of furniture that were transformed. So I thought, wouldn't it be lovely to have a bed in the room? And there you could think about how we need to rest, how we need to sleep, what do we dream about, and what do we yearn for? I think it looks, very sad and good. I drew a picture of a bed, and it turned out that it was this bed that I found, and it's a 100-year-old French army cot that folds. I think there's nothing better than getting into bed, except for getting out of bed. You get dressed, you decide who you are and what your fashion is, and that's always a decision. So I chose 18th century breeches This cap is 13th to 14th century Egyptian. The embroidery and the quilting and the metallic gold thread that's in it, it's a tremendously complicated labor, and it is believed that it was used as a burial cap. So it adds another element of mystery and pathos to the object. This perfect little pair of slippers, I've always wanted to live in those slippers, basically, and to go to a few balls, maybe. It's delicate and just perfect. So we all need yellow shoes with bows on them. The Rietveld chair, which is not incredibly comfortable but beloved by everybody, was designed around 1934. And it's a painting that I use at the end of the children's book, From Aha to Zigzag, because you're zigzagging through life and many things can happen to you, but it's always good to have this chair as an anchor. And sitting next to the Rietveld chair is a cantharos from 6th to 7th century BC, but it looks to me like a Mickey Mouse cap. The Cooper Hewitt is a Smithsonian institution, and of course they have a beautiful Abraham Lincoln archive, and I fell madly in love with Lincoln, as many people do. So I was able to go to Washington to the Smithsonian, and Harry Rubenstein, who's the curator of history, was able to help me a lot with my research.
We have this incredibly interesting collection of Lincoln material that came to the Smithsonian as early as 1867. Shortly after all the conspiracy trials were finished. These include everything from our very famous Lincoln high hat that he wore to Ford's Theater to his pocket watch.
I chose the pall that hung over his coffin, a black, tasseled, beautiful piece of fabric, and his timepiece, which spoke volumes about who he was and the relationship that we had to him. The show for the Cooper Hewitt is an incredible convergence of things that I love. I love Lincoln, music, Nico's music, and for me the most important thing is to create a place where you're kind of undoing whatever you're doing, that you're just sort of in this strange environment and all of a sudden music wafts at you, and it happens to be music that is Lincoln's pocket watch ticking, which hasn't ticked in 150 years, and I think will never tick again. So I think this is one of those extraordinary emotional opportunities that connects you to history and dreaming and the future, and I think it'll be really great.
One of the things about everything Maira does is that there's a sense of sort of melancholy and joy, sort of, you know, simultaneously existing in a single thing. You know, Maira loves like, you know, an ugly dog or a beautiful bucket or something that's, you know, that's simultaneously functional, practical, hideous, and gorgeous. That sentiment is something that's been part of my own work, like since I've known her, really. And in our collaborations together, it's always been, you access a sort of emotional core of a thing, and from there make something sort of radiant. And what you'll end up with is something, again, simultaneously sort of joyful and melancholy. I mean, for me, it's like, you know, it feels like Lincoln was a sort of curator of a time of enormous change, and also someone who was in a constant process of negotiation, and a constant process of compromise, and a constant process of, you know, translating something from one side to the other. So for me, it's really about just taking this sort of repetitive motion of the ticking of a clock, and stylizing it and turning it into something that sort of feels like it was already happening and feels like it can continue to happen for a long time. So it's not, I think the piece is going to be a cyclical thing that shouldn't feel like it has a beginning and an ending.
This is a 16th century engraving. It's full of fanciful flourishes and swirls. And when Nico looked at it, he felt that it was inspirational in terms of it being gibberish. So that's the piece that he wrote. I think that everybody is aware of the dualities that exist in life, how humor intersects with sorrow, that we're not in one static state, and that we all live in a state of duality, which keeps changing all the time. So it's a sticky wicket to be alive. When my mother died, I started to embroider what turned out to be a mourning sampler, and found that in the meditation of working, I was able to channel my grief into something that was productive and creative and life-affirming. So I created 4 panels using the quote of Goethe from Faust, which expressed so acutely and so accurately how I felt. And the ability to spend time is the healing process. So the creativity that's put into that is something that regenerates life. So here's the quote. So, I feel a sense of dread. Tear after tear is falling. My rigid heart is tenderly unmanned. What I possess seems something far away, and what had disappeared proves real. Which is very true. The final vitrine in the show is, appropriately enough, about death. And of course, with death, the finality makes you think of time and how much time we all have in this world. And one of the most poignant pieces in the show is a mourning sampler made by a woman for her family, a very, very elaborate embroidery.
Here it is.
Lincoln's in the room.
Yes. This is Lincoln's fine gold pocket watch. You know, to me, it really, it has this wonderful weight and feel. It's sort of the Rolex of its day. Lincoln purchased this, after finally getting paid from a railroad case.
I always do that when I get paid.
This is probably the most expensive thing that Lincoln ever bought for himself personally. And it's, one of those symbols you can imagine that as, a successful trial lawyer, every time you pull it out of your pocket, you open up the dial, you're telling all of your colleagues that you're a success.
And he knew what time dinner was.
And then there's this other story of the watch. The story is that when Lincoln goes to Washington, he needs to have his watch cleaned, and so he sends it to a local jewelry store. And while the workman is working on the watch, the owner of the shop rushes up into the workroom and says, "Fort Sumter has been attacked, the war has begun." At that moment, he's holding Lincoln's watch. So he opens it up and he inscribes a message inside, which says, "On this day, Fort Sumter has been attacked. Thank God we have a government." And, he seals that message that we didn't know about until 2009 when we opened up the watch to discover that he had done this. The watchmaker, George Thomas, had agreed that the watch was ever available, he'd be willing to clean the watch for us. And we all went up and we, gathered around as he took apart and showed all the pieces and then put it all back together and then wound the watch, which was exciting in so many different ways. There's very few sounds from the past that you can hear again. And I personally wanted to hear the sound that Lincoln heard every day as he wound his watch and put it in his pocket. When you hear the ticking, it's a nice, clear, steady pace. It's got its own sort of beauty in its sound.
Well, see, no. We made it through the entire book.
What is the most precious thing? Take Thank you.